Lori, and hey everybody, thanks for joining us. This part of this day, whatever part of the day it is in your part of the world, to talk about analytics. Lori nailed it. It's really meant to be an executive briefing. So we'll talk a lot about the different components of analytics in the modern world, but our audience is really business people. So it's okay if you're more on the technical side, more on the business side. But what I want you to walk away with today is this overview of what are these different things, when is the right time to use them, how might they change my business, not necessarily how to do them, but enough about how the watch is built to appreciate how you might set that up and make it work inside of your business, and have a lot of topics where you can then go do further research and investigation. So whether you're a C-level executive or a manager or a hands-on technical person or a rep trying to get your hands around what this is all about, I think there's going to be some content in here for you today. So let's dive in, but let's dive in this way. I want to start a little bit different. I want to start with a story. So here it is. Not so long ago and not so far away, there was a brand new technology that was emerging. It was becoming available on a more widespread basis, and it could help us get previously impossible things done. And it freed up people to realize more of their human potential, but it also had the potential to destroy life. It could rip through an organization in the blink of an eye. It could destroy jobs. It could destroy entire economies potentially. It was very difficult to control. So many people feared it. They feared even getting near it. But in the end, we did learn to control it. And it unleashed an era of progress that we could not have begun to imagine until we had actually embraced it, until we'd gotten on the other side of the adoption and learning curve. So telling you that story, you might think, okay, Jeff's giving us an optimistic picture of the future of analytics or AI or something like that. And maybe that's true. I mean, shoot, we're at a time in history where there are a lot of things affecting us this way. But that's not how I built the story. I actually built the story around something much more primitive than what we're experiencing today. I built a story around fire. Now, bear with me for a second. Let's talk about that. Because fire, there were some obvious things, right? Kept us warm at night, might have protected us from some predators. But the smallest immediate benefit of fire actually led to the greatest long-term transformation. Because until we discovered and harnessed the power of fire, we weren't cooking our food. And scientists tell us our large human brains need so much energy that before we started cooking food, we spent about 9 hours a day eating. Not the hunting and gathering, just eating the food that we found to eat. We had to eat that much of our time away each day to feed this energy-consuming brain that we have, as well as the other parts of our body that consume energy. So fire put us out of a full-time job, right? That 9-hour-a-day job, we didn't need to spend nearly as much time because cooking meant we could cook and eat meat and vegetables, and cooking releases tons of nutrients, and our body has much easier access to food year-round. Our brains have better access to the food that gives them energy. So what would we do with all that spare time? Be unemployed, be lazy, play video games? No, of course not. That unleashed us to use that brain, to unleash an explosion of innovation and productivity we couldn't have imagined before. And among the innovations that led us to were other things like farming in an agrarian society. And the curve was the same there, right? We put people out of jobs because now, instead of everyone being hunters and gatherers, we had organized, structured farming and agrarian society. And society changed and improved. Written language and the printing press. And again, society changed and improved. Every one of these threatened to disrupt the fabric of human society. And every one of them did. And some of what we went through in those learning curves was worse. But eventually, when we fully embraced it, it was for the better, right? AI is fire. AI is farming. It's a new way of communicating. We know it's big, but like all those transformations before, I'm convinced we still don't know how big or how important it is. So I'm going to talk nuts and bolts of Microsoft's analytics tools in this session today, but I'm going to refer back to a little bit of how big this is, because If you go look at every one of these societal disruptions we've gone through in our human history before, recent and long ago, one of the things that's clear is the people and the societies that did not embrace it early were the ones that were more and more at risk of being left behind. So I want my message to you today to be, wherever you sit, whatever part of the world, whatever job function, whatever organization, government, nonprofit, for-profit, or just developing your own individual skills, I want part of the message you get today to be, I need to understand and embrace this because this is the future. I need it for myself. I need it for my organization. I need it for my society. I need it for my children. This is something that it's the next thing we need to understand and do something with. Okay, so cultural transformation is really at the heart of what this is all about to me. Now I'm going to get more into the brass tacks. Quick introduction. For those of you who I don't know yet, my name is Jeff Abels. I run a company called C5 Insight in the southeastern part. I live in the southeastern part of the United States. We operate all over the place. My passion is around this idea of people engagement, but digital-driven people engagement. Not losing the human touch, but taking all that great human touch that already exists and using digital to help us have deeper, broader, more meaningful relationships with more people than we ever could have before. So this is near and dear to what's central to my purpose in life. But much more central to my purpose in life is this. This is one of the things that's a driving passion that makes me get up and enjoy it every day. My family. So my wife and I are empty nesters. Our two daughters are, I keep saying recently married. It's not so recent anymore. It's been 3+ years, I guess, for both of them now. And our youngest just had a grandson right at the dawn of this COVID thing happening. And we've been blessed to visit them. Unfortunately, they had a tree fall on their house on the coast of North Carolina last night in a hurricane, but everybody is safe and we're working on it. So just another adventure in 2020 for us, I guess. My wife and I love spending time together. We've got a new pup to help fill our empty nest. We love riding our motorcycle together. In fact, we're taking it this weekend up to Kentucky and we're going to do a little bourbon tour together. So that's some exciting stuff too. Love to get to know you guys better. There's some contact information on this slide. I'll put it up again on the last slide. We will be open to questions. As Lori said, you can submit them here, but you can also connect with me on, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. My name spelling's kind of unique. There's my Twitter address, there's my email address. So love to hear from you if there's something you want to share, whether it's an anecdote or something you're looking for some information on. That's all cool stuff. Okay, let's talk analytics now. So when you think about analytics and all the stuff available from Microsoft, this is kind of the list. There's a few things non-Microsoft here, but related, most of this is Microsoft. Now, this is a Dynamics event, so you may not be familiar with all of these things. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I'm going to touch on many of these as we go through the session today. So remember, if you're on Dynamics 365, particularly for, I'll say the CRM range of offerings, which includes for sales, but that's also customer care, field service, marketing, all of those. So you've got some great analytics tools built right in. And my experience is most organizations aren't doing enough to fully leverage those, but your views, your charts, your dashboards, reports, those kinds of things. You also have Sales Insights. I'm calling it Sales Insights Free because there's kind of a paid part and a free part. It used to be called Relationship Assistant, and that's kind of some low-end artificial intelligence that you can leverage as well. There's some third-party apps. I'm going to talk specifically about a couple of those in today's session. Not here to sell you on any of those per se, but there's some things going on unique with those that you should probably know about. So I'll mention those on a slide or two as we get into it. Those third-party apps are Dynamics-specific third-party applications. And by the way, please don't take that as a comprehensive list of every analytical third-party thing available. There's just a couple that kind of came out as ones that's worth taking the time to talk about as I put these slides together. Then on the right-hand side of the slide, there's the Power Platform and Azure. And all of these have their own analytical offerings available too. You're probably familiar with Power BI already. There's a whole suite of Dynamics 365 blank, where blank is basically analytical extensions, AI and BI-based analytical extensions for the Microsoft Dynamics 365 product suite. There's AI Builder. There's things in preview mode that are coming soon. Project Cortex, by the way, I need to put a slide in here about this. amazing stuff. I think it's going to be transformative in businesses. I'll try to modify the slides next time I do this to plan to talk about that, but that's more SharePoint side driven. The rest of this is more Dynamics driven, which is our focus today. And then all those things on the far right that say Azure something, those are things that are available to developers to build into anything they're doing. And those things they're doing might be things that are built in Power Apps or Power Automate or other developer things. And in fact, when you see all those things that say Azure in front of them, and then to the left of them, you see all the Dynamics 365 things, those things in that left-hand column are actually using the developer tools in the right-hand column to deliver that. So you're getting some of that Azure stuff by some of the things you're already using in Dynamics or some of the extensions available from Microsoft. So again, not going to try to define every single one of those. If you do searches, there's tons of marketing material on those Microsoft's made available where you can learn more. Our learning objectives for today, kind of mentioned this up front, but I'll briefly mention it again. This is an executive briefing. So we're going to talk about what are these things, enough about how they work so you'll have an idea of when to use it. So you're not going to walk out of here being a data scientist if you're not already. But if you are a data scientist, you might walk out of here with a few other ideas about how to communicate and share it internally. And if you're someone else who says, I might be a consumer of that, either as an end user or a manager or a leader, you'll have a little bit better of an idea of what to ask for and maybe how to think about business strategy around those things. So when you think about this, I love backing up what I'm talking about with some real research. So here's some real research from IBM. Every couple of years, they do something called the Global CEO Survey. And this was one of the recent Global CEO surveys. So they talked to 1,500 CEOs, interviewed 1,500 CEOs from the largest, fastest growing, most successful organizations on earth. And then they compare them to each other. And they say, let's take the top 20% based on true analytics. So who's the largest, who's growing the fastest, whose margins are doing the best, and then everyone else. So don't hear that as the 20% that are profitable and the 80% that are not. It's this, these are all the best. It's the best of the best, and it's all the rest. And they said, what makes the best of the best the best? What's the big differentiator? The IBM research found 3 things, and all of them had to do with analytics. So the best of the best are 108% better at accessing data. So they've got their act together with their ability to get their hands around data. And they're 108% better at extracting knowledge, drawing insights out of that data, doing the analytics work. And they're 84% better at translating those insights into action. So they kind of found all 3 of those things are distinct pieces of the puzzle you have to pull together to do this well. And so that's what I want to have be our outline for the rest of the day today. Now, I think part of this is there's a cultural difference with those organizations. And I've talked about culture already, so I'm not going to talk about that more. But those 3 things kind of break down more or less into 4 categories. So one is accessing data. We're going to start with that. Number 2 is discovering insights. How do they do that? What does that look like? Number 3 is now how do we put those into action? And how does analytics even help us with that in our modern world? And then the last one I want to kind of come back to, which brings all these together, is this idea of agility, faster continuous learning across organizations. Clearly an important part of the analytical piece of the puzzle. So let's dive into each of those topics in a little more detail. Under Armour, you've probably heard of them, the athletic apparel guys. They wanted to be more than what they were. So not too many years ago, they created a program called the Connected Fitness Platform. And the idea for this clothing manufacturer was we want to track, analyze, and share health data to our customers' phones to help them in their fitness journey. But really the underlying appeal was knowledge is power. We want to get to know our customers better than anybody's ever known their customers in this kind of marketplace before. And the evidence that that has been working is real. One of the things they found was they found a new health trend going on in New Zealand. And they knew that this type of health trend was the kind that kind of sweeps the world. So they're actually able to develop and introduce new products. So by the time that was hitting the United States of America, they actually already had a product offering available based on information that would have just been completely unavailable to them before. Now, they're growing and changing since they did this. In 2019, Motley Fool said connected fitness was the one bright spot on Under Armour's overall performance for that year. They're now going through some consolidation. They may even sell that off, and that might have been part of their plan. Also in the news, you might have seen that Google is putting an offer out there for Fitbit. Why would they do that? Not just for a thing to give their customers, but because knowledge is power, right? Now, I'm not going to be here to argue about, is this regulated correctly or not? Obviously, all of that's really important too. But ultimately, the data we gather gives us knowledge, and the way we do something with that gives us the ability to better serve customers, create better experiences, and ultimately to have longer lasting, more beneficial relationships for both sides of the formula. So what's the data, right? Remember, this is the first step. I'm not talking analytics. I'm talking, it's the number one thing IBM said is the ability to manage the data. So there's three categories of data that businesses manage when they're trying to manage data around customers or even employee relationships. I love acronyms. So the acronym here is BAD, not intended to be a play on words, but maybe there's some irony there. So it's behavioral, attitudinal, and demographic, right? So how are people behaving? What are their attitudes towards things, survey type of stuff? And what's the demographic information? Where do they live, income, stuff like that. Now, if you're B2B, another word for demographic is firmographic, right? How many employees do they have? How many beds in their hospital? How many, what's their annual revenue? Whatever those things are. So when you think about these things in terms of their power or their value and actually making decisions and predicting the future, I've arranged them in their order of value. So the most valuable information you can have, behavior. In fact, since I was doing statistical analysis work at a very large bank in the 90s, one of the things we always came away with was past history is always the best predictor of future history, right? So if you're a CRM sales user, you can probably relate to the idea that even though this customer is promising me they're going to make a decision on this opportunity I'm pursuing, I've pursued 15 opportunities with them before. Half of them they never moved forward with, and the other half all went to the lowest price bidder. So I know, regardless of what their promises are, they're probably going to continue behaving the way they have in the past. That's behavioral. That's the power of behavioral analytics. What you've bought in the past predicts what you're likely to buy in the future. Now, when you look at our business behavior, organizational behavior in terms of what data do we actually make available to do analytics on, the shame of it all is it almost runs dead opposite. So we tend to find it easier to get that demographic data that's interesting and helpful, and sometimes it's the only thing available, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and then attitudinal, and then behavioral. Why is that? Because behavioral is hard. Behavior is managed on multiple systems. Sometimes the end buyer isn't even connected to us as a company. Behavioral are things like interactions. When I'm interacting with a sales team, well, that's complex data in terms of how it's structured. So putting it into a format I can analyze and make decisions with, that's tricky. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can do that, but also what Microsoft is doing to make that happen on a more automatic basis in the future. That's a subtle point, but as someone who's been doing this for 30 plus years, I can tell you it's a game changer, and the people who aren't on board with that are going to be at serious risk of being left behind in the not too distant future. So important message for you to get when I get to that in a few slides here. So let's talk about a transactional case study here, okay? This is an agricultural supplies manufacturer. Essentially, this branch of this organization focuses on golf courses. So they're a typical manufacturer. I don't know if we have any manufacturers here today, but most manufacturers sell in a multi-tiered approach, right? They sell to distributors who then sell sometimes to buyers and then to end users, or sometimes distributors straight to end users. So you might have a distributor, a retailer, and then someone who buys in your store, or a distributor and a collection of golf courses, and then the golf course superintendents who use the equipment that you're selling or something like that. So, and then they had some direct retail sales as well. So this program goes back a little ways, and you may not notice this just because it washes out in the slide there a little bit, but one of the things they looked at was, if we want to have information to help us drive better relationships, we need to have information about and from that end user. And yes, we have reps who call on them occasionally, but it's mostly the distributor, and the distributor is mostly engaging with the buyer. And we need to have that relationship with the end user. So they created a multi-tier loyalty program. And they said, okay, distributors, you're going to get points for the loyalty program. End users and buyers, you're going to get points too. You have to type in the SKUs you purchased and your invoice numbers and things like that. So we can ultimately be sure that this is actual information, but we're going to give you nice awards for being loyal customers. And the rewards themselves aren't that material, but they did enough work with it to kind of find the ones that change behavior. And then they were able to do some pretty impressive things like say, hey, you know what? We have some buying cycles, as you can imagine, in the golf course industry that are very seasonal. And sometimes if there's something going on in one part of the world, we can really have a suppressed buying trend going on somewhere. We actually can now predict those coming, and we can put special programs and pricing out there to flatten our demand curve and make our business run much more smoothly because we have information to make those decisions with for the first time in our history. So that's kind of a little bit of a background of loyalty programs, but it's interesting because a lot of B2B companies have not embraced loyalty programs yet, and there's a tremendous amount of power in those. That's a case study about transactional information, right? And that's the most powerful piece of data you can have. So if you do not have transactional information in your analytical systems yet, and analytical might be your CRM solution, your BI solution, you need to get it there, right? It's probably in your ERP solution already. That's great. Your ERP solution is made to process transactions, but your ERP solution is not generally made to connect with customers. That means the data in ERP has to go somewhere else so you can have that transactional data closer to where you're making decisions about customers. Now the next tier down, what about interactive information? So interaction is the second most powerful piece of information you can have. It's still in that behavioral column that we looked at, but it's not transactions, it's not what they're buying, it's what they're doing, it's how they're engaging, it's are they showing up for those meetings you set up? Are they emailing you back and forth? How many times have you called them? What's the sentiment of those calls? What's going on with those things? So I point all that out to you to say incredibly valuable information. What's the biggest issue organizations have with getting people to adopt their CRM solutions? It's manual data entry. And manual data entry is where most interactive information is captured. There are some ways to automate this more and more in the future, and I'm sure they will continue to expand, but there's no fully automatic option for especially that field sales rep yet. So why do I say all this? Because it is incredibly valuable, important information. And when you look at the AI offerings that Microsoft is starting to put out there, looking at things saying, hey, Jeff, based on the last interaction you had with this person, it looks like they might be upset. Maybe you should reach out to them. Or, hey, based on these opportunities you have with them, it looks like it's been too long since you've talked to them. You need to do something about that. Well, if I don't have interactive data inside of CRM, I cannot have those artificial intelligence-based promptings to help me be a better person at connecting with my customers. So we put together a ebook, and I put business card there, but you can just contact me. I've done this presentation live on why CRM activity management, and it will help you walk through all of those things. I've literally sat in presentations from CRM implementation partners, and they've kind of said, we don't think it's important for sales reps to enter interactive information, activities, and those kinds of things. And as a technology implementation firm, they may be right. But as someone who wants you to get the most out of your investment in CRM and to be ahead of the curve, I strongly disagree with that sentiment. That ebook can help you understand why that's important better, maybe communicate it to your sales managers better, and maybe help you set some strategies for making that happen better. Okay, so a couple of quick things here. We're actually going to dive into some CRM technology. So this is Dynamics 365 Sales Insights. I'm calling it advanced. So what I mean by that is there's some Sales Insights free in Dynamics 365 these days, but there's the paid Sales Insights add-on. This is the paid add-on. So one of the things the paid add-on can do is have conversation intelligence. So if you have a inside sales group, if you have a group of people who are calling down a list of customers or taking inbound calls, you can actually integrate that without too much difficulty with Sales Insights so that those conversations are not only recorded, but they're transcribed. You can see the transcribed recording up there, right? Hello, hello, this is Bert from Contoso, and so forth. It's literally transcribing that information as it comes in, and it's tracking metrics. Hey, how fast are you speaking? What's your average rate? how you'll see more in a future slide here. What's the sentiment being expressed so that reps can get real-time feedback on, here's how you compare the people who are being more effective and productive. Here's how you can fine-tune your behavior to help you better connect with customers, to give customers a better experience overall. Cool, cool, powerful stuff. Next up is another one. I'm departing a little bit from this, but I want to give you an idea of cognitive services. So this is part of Azure, but again, it's a surface directly inside of Dynamics. So cognitive services is looking at something, whether it's a picture or words, and it's trying to understand something about it, something that's qualitative in nature almost. So you can see that relationship assistant box there. It says, this email puts the opportunity at risk. And that person, Paige, she and I did some testing with this, she's a coworker, sounded upset in an email. So cognitive services is behind what's doing that. And that's the relationship assistance. That's the free part of sales intelligence now built into Dynamics. Is it right all the time? No, of course not, but it's getting smarter all the time. And at least it gives you a prompting to kind of go, look, if I'm drowning in emails and I can't look at all of them in detail, that's certainly true of me, and I gotta believe it's probably true of most of the world these days. It can point out things to me to go, this one might be one you wanna take a look at. It looks like something's going on here. You know, hey, why was that late? Or, hey, this statement of work you sent me really wasn't what I expected it to be. There's something negative going on in there. And that's looking at it on a one-off basis. That next little box down that says sentiment, you can look at this on employee or customer records and look at it in aggregate. So you can say, oh, here's what our overall sentiment index looks like right now. You can do sentiment analysis on social channels. So you can say, here's a channel where people are doing mentions of our organization, if you have a big enough brand that that's happening. And you can say, how is the sentiment changing over time? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? And if it's trending more negative, what can I do about it? But also very cool, you can see that that's my native OneDrive over there, just with some personal pictures on it. And if you look close, you can see some hashtags marking what's going on in those pictures, right? There's a bottle of wine there and it says hashtag food. There's my dog and it says hashtag dog in that picture. Behind the scenes, cognitive services, whether it's a SharePoint photo library or whether it's your personal OneDrive photo library, it's looking at every picture and it's actually trying to help you tag what's in there without you doing any work. So if I remember I saw a bird when I was in South Africa, I was like, where's that darn bird picture? I love that picture. I can search for bird, even though it's not saved under a name that has anything to do with bird, and that's going to come up for me automatically. Cooler thing with all of that is I can train this. OneDrive, not so much, but SharePoint photo libraries using the power of Azure, I can actually load images and train them. So one of our clients is a client who does a lot of consumer selling. They've got a big e-commerce presence and they've got a great customer care department. And they take lots of returns via customer care that are under warranty. When they do that, they need to make sure that the product that they're offering the warranty on is the one that's covered, and they need to make sure it's a type of damage that's actually covered. So customers need to send in a photo. Well, that was a very manual process up until recently. Customer would take a photo, they'd attach it to an email, goes into an email queue, a rep has to go open up every one of those emails, eyeball what's in it, look at the code on it to identify the product ID, look that up in their database to see if it matches. Well, now that can happen automatically about 65% of the time. And when it does, it essentially says, I'm giving this a rating in terms of how confident I am that I've translated the text correctly and how confident I am that this is our product and this is covered damage. So if it gets beyond a certain threshold, the rep still goes and has to look at it manually to say, let me double check this to make sure it's right. But after doing a lot of testing, they know that about 65% of them are now coming in with a high enough confidence level that the process is way more automated than it ever used to be. Customers get much faster service than they used to get before. Reps don't have to spend as much time doing brute force work that really doesn't engage their intellect as a human. It's just administrative baloney work that they prefer not to do. Now they can leverage their great skills at embracing customers, there was relational skills, and also have a lot more empowerment to make better decisions on behalf of customers and through customers. So I spent a lot of time on that session. I'll probably spend a little less time on these other sections, but what I want you to take away is the data is the foundation for all of this, right? Data is the raw material of the 21st century. So if we don't have our act together on data, we're not going to be able to build relationships and survive in the 21st century. Now let's dive into, so we've got the data. What do we do with the data to actually draw out better insights, make better decisions? So you may have never heard of the organization Cone, but I'll bet you've ridden on their elevators and their escalators and moving sidewalks many times. They're based in Finland, and they brought together IoT technology, so IoT, Internet of Things, so all of their equipment is constantly being monitored for what's going on. They brought together artificial intelligence capabilities. You might have heard of Einstein and Watson. Those are two different AI tools that are available. Those are not, by the way, Microsoft ones. The same kind of things are available for Microsoft, but this case study just doesn't happen to be a Microsoft one. They monitor all that equipment, and they proactively predict failure risk. And when they see a failure risk, they're monitoring, their AI automatically generates the work order, schedules field service to deliver it, and then augmented reality combined with image recognition helps to identify parts, checks against inventory, evaluates next steps for repair, and remote specialists can then enable field service generalists to deliver repairs anywhere in the world. What I mean by that is I might know generally how to do things, but there might be a specialist in a global office who needs to engage with me to do something. Well, that specialist doesn't have to get on an airplane and fly out there. With all the data that they're fed, plus the augmented reality, they can guide and coach that field service person who's on site through the process of making the repair happen. All of that facilitated because they're gathering data and have the analytics in place to not just analyze it and do reports, but to predict the future. So when you think about big data, there's really three categories to think about. There's three categories I like to break it into to make it very understandable. The first one is the one we're most used to. It's called descriptive data. And I think of it as your rear view mirror. That's your reports, your dashboards, business intelligence tools like Power BI, although some of these are also now adding AI types of future looking capabilities into them. The classic stuff, the rows and the columns, the charts and the graphs, those are all rear view mirrors. Those are all saying, here's what has happened already that I can show you, that I can report on. It's important, it's powerful, right? Some examples of that are, I want to segment my customers by preference. I want to see historical power consumption needs. I want to understand the sentiment of customers or employees. Now, sentiment is not itself descriptive, but once the data has been captured, it becomes available to make it available in descriptive systems. Year-over-year revenue by product, another descriptive piece of analytics. So that's most of what we spend our time looking at. But in a car, you drive your car with a rear view mirror. In the business world, it was all that was available to us until recently. You want to spend most of your time in a car looking out the front window. You want to be predictive, right? Nobody drives with a rear view mirror. So these questions aren't just how did we do last year? Let's do 10% better. That's a descriptive type of conversation. Predictive just depends on historical data. So it starts with descriptive data, but it predicts the future based on the current situation. Remember what I said about data quality levels? Past behavior is the best predictor of the future. So you don't get data about the future until you get to the future. But if you can put enough data points about the past together, you can start to predict the future. So predictive predicts specific actions that might take place. Examples, I want to score my leads for how likely they are to become opportunities. How can I do that? Well, I can see how many leads and of what type became opportunities in the past, and now I can predict which ones are more likely to become opportunities in the future. I want a recommendation engine. So based on what's in somebody's basket, I can recommend other things that should go into their basket. You guys have seen that kind of thing if you've ever shopped on Amazon.com. I want to predict employee attrition, machine failure. All of those things are predictive. They start with historical, descriptive information. They predict the future. And then the third and final category is your GPS. It's prescriptive. It's still emerging. In fact, all of these are emerging to some extent, but prescriptive is very much still emerging. Where prescriptive can provide insights and predict future outcomes, prescriptive can actually recommend specific actions and show the implications of those options. So remember your GPS, right? Your GPS isn't just predicting where you're going to drive. It's actually predicting the best way for you to get there. And nowadays, it doesn't just do that based on having a lot of roadmaps in there. It's bringing in, let's call it Internet of Things data in real time to say, traffic jam up ahead, road stop up ahead, police radar up ahead. Here are some other actions you can take to better arrive at your destination on time, based on not just predicting what's going on, but prescribing exactly where you should turn, what you should do. Some examples: financial services, merging transactional types of information, looking at economic information. What should we do based on an economic outcome? Even weather data to more accurately plan for future capital investments, right? The weather's going to do this in this area. It's going to do this to crops in that area. That's going to change our business. We can make better prescriptive decisions based on that. And there's also simple prescriptive things you see showing up in CRM, like it looks like it's been a long time since you've met with this important customer. Maybe you should set up a follow-up appointment with them. That's a form of prescriptive data as well. Again, not always perfect. It's more recommendations than it is hard tasks, but they're getting better and better all the time. So let's look at some more examples of these things, how all of these things work together. So we're going to start with descriptive. So to help you understand, I'm going to get a little bit into how the watch is built here. And I don't want to lose you, but I think this is important because it's easy for people to look at BI, business intelligence solutions. I don't know how many of you are using Power BI or things like it. You get the demo and you think, wow, this is great. Let's feed all of our data in and have great reports. Well, it takes a little bit more than that. And it's helpful as a leader to understand what's happening behind the scenes to bring all of this together. So in the sources of data we talked about, we have two rich sources of knowledge. We have transactions, those live in our financial systems. We have interactions, those tend to live in our CRM systems, right? So the first is locked up in financial systems, the second is locked up in CRM. We'd like to bring these two worlds together. How do we do it? And the idea is, oh, we have this thing called Power BI or some other BI reporting solution where it can look at all those systems and all the data from all those systems at once, and it can give us one reporting solution on all that data. So good concept, but is it enough? Can we just connect CRM to BI and have full access to all data we need to work with customers in CRM? And unfortunately, the answer is no. There's a little more we have to do with that, because if it's just in BI, first of all, we can't react to it in CRM. Let me give you an example. Let's say your marketing department says, we have identified a segment of people who purchase from us about twice a year, very high purchase volumes, and they have these demographic trends. And if we target them with marketing campaigns and serve them up as leads to our sales team, we're going to be able to radically improve their experience with us and the profitability of the organization. Sounds great. How is marketing going to pull that list? Well, if that list has not been pushed from BI into CRM, if that financial information that doesn't exist in CRM to start with is not in CRM, it's going to be a heroic act to try to pull that list. You need that information inside of CRM if you want to respond to it inside of CRM. So remember our IBM statistic. It's not just about getting your hands around data. It's actually making access to the right data available to the right people in the right place to make better decisions faster. Now, the way you do that, by the way, is through a process. I don't hear this term as often anymore. I hear new terms like data lakes and stuff like that. But ultimately, behind the scenes, what's happening is you got to extract information from a system. You've got to transform it. You got to reformat it a little bit. And then you've got to load it into a new system, right? So we're taking data out of your finance system, out of your CRM system. We're putting it into BI to make it more reportable. And then we're ultimately bringing it back into CRM to make it available to the people who need to use it. I give you all that detail to tell you that, again, it's not as easy as buy BI licenses, turn it on, point it to finance and CRM, and you're in business. There's a lot of backroom work to do to get the data ready. A lot of people get a Power BI demo and they go, wow, this is great, self-service reports. We'll turn it on and people will start serving themselves. And eventually you can realize that vision, but it takes time, weeks, months, perhaps years, depending on how fast you can evolve to make that happen. Now, here's one really important thing. If I've lost you on a little bit of technical detail here, it's a good time to tune back in, because Microsoft has rolled out what's called referred to as a common data service. Common data model is now being called DataFlex. The term doesn't really matter. I like the term common data model for this conversation because I think it describes it better. What it is it is a common way of storing information. It's a common way of saying, here's how we define a customer record. Here's what an account is. Here's what a contact is. Here's what activities and interactions look like, phone calls and appointments and those kinds of things. Here's where we track notes. Here's what a transaction looks like. Here's what a line item looks like. I could go on and on, but a common data model, instead of saying, hey, we bought an accounting system from one place and a CRM system from another place, and we can make them talk to each other, but there's nothing necessarily common about that. A common data model basically says, hey, we are Microsoft, we are giving you this common data model, and when you put your data into this common data model, we will be able to make a lot of that ETL stuff and data preparation stuff and AI stuff that takes a lot of grunt work on the front end. We're going to be able to make that happen for you automatically. So I am convinced, looking at this as a guy who used to spend, my department used to spend about 80% of their time doing what I would call data processing work so we could facilitate analytics. That 80% is going to go away. We're going to unleash people to say, instead of being a data processing administrator, I can now be a data scientist. And folks who don't get on board with a system that supports a common data model are going to be left behind. By folks, I don't mean individuals, I mean organizations. The day is coming not too far into the distant future where if you don't have a system with a common data model that can pull out a lot of analytical insight for you automatically, and you're having to do that manually, you will be left behind. Okay, so that was prescriptive. Let's talk descriptive here. This is just going to kind of build while I talk here. So descriptive, I'm sorry, that was descriptive. This is the business intelligence demo of descriptive. So you can see this is Power BI, right? I've got cool reports here. I've got charts. I've got graphs. I've got maps. I can interact with this. I can click on it. If you've ever worked with Power BI, this is already familiar to you. If you haven't, but you've worked with Dynamics dashboards, you're probably looking at this saying, that does a lot of stuff that Dynamics dashboards don't do for me. You're right, it does. In fact, here it is building in AI for you. So I can go in, I can start typing in questions, and it is looking at the data saying, here are the types of questions I can answer based on what you've just typed in. And so I can kind of go deeper into that. I kind of got one key number that I wanted. That's great. Hey, you know what? I want that as a chart. So let's look at it by district instead of just a flat number overall. So why BI? If you already have Dynamics dashboards, is there a case to do BI? Well, number one, the idea of bringing data in from multiple places into your BI tool together, that's a great case in point. But also the ability to look at your CRM data differently, really important part of this as well. Not only because it's more charts and graphs, but you can also do some data work behind the scenes to look at CRM data differently. What I mean by that is you're probably used to a funnel diagram, right? Funnel diagram basically says, here's our sales process, here's how many opportunities are at the top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. They look cool, but if you spend any time with a sales manager, most of them will tell you, this really doesn't help me manage my business better at all. I need to understand what has happened historically with that funnel, right? Past behavior, best predictor of future behavior. CRM systems do not track the past very well. ERP systems track every single transaction so you can rebuild a picture of the past if you want to. If I go into CRM and I open an opportunity and I say, oh, this opportunity is worth $50,000, but it's actually worth $35,000 now, and I'm going to change the status to this new status that I have. All CRM knows is what's currently in there. You want to go rebuild the past. Power BI is one of the tools that can help you effectively do that. So you can now look at historical trends, not just static information out of CRM. Now, back in Dynamics, if you're using Dynamics dashboards, you might notice, well, some of these items on this dashboard look a little bit unique. What's going on with this? This is actually bringing in components of Power BI back into Dynamics. So instead of training your Dynamics users, hey, you have to go into Power BI to see certain things and Dynamics to see certain things, no, I can put everything in Dynamics, native stuff like the funnel you see there, as well as Power BI stuff like you see with those couple of bar charts in the lower center and lower right. All of those are in one place for my users to be able to go and consume them. Now, you may not know this, but Dynamics also now has these more operational dashboards built in. So these dashboards are actually built entity by entity. These are a great type of dashboard for people managing their work directly inside of CRM, right? The old dashboards still available, still valuable. Those are more snapshots of here's what things look like in general. Maybe here's my personal task list. But if I'm working as an inside sales team and I've got to manage a pipeline in partnership with a lot of other people sitting inside of an inside sales call center or a remote one in this day and age, I can actually use these more operational dashboards. You see this opportunity dashboard to automatically prioritize what I'm doing and work through my list in a way that's meaningful to me while collaborating with people I'm working with. So those are great types of things for inside sales teams, customer care teams, people who are operationally working with Dynamics data. So it's important to know your different types of descriptive tools available to you. One last descriptive case study here, or one or two last descriptive case studies. This is actually bringing together data that comes out of Dynamics. It's summarized in Power BI. It's brought into Microsoft Teams, and the team is collaborating around how they can improve the score together. So you can tie all of these solutions together to do different things. And we're still just talking descriptive right now information. And as we begin the transition from descriptive to predictive, here's some of the other things being offered as part of Sales Insights, right? The free version or the paid version. So relationship health is one. So relationship health can actually look at what's going on in an account or an opportunity. And through a combination of text analysis for sentiment, as well as some analytics around number of contacts, number of activities made, and recency, it can tell you, how does this look? So if you look over at those bubbles on the far left there, it can say, hey, here's all of your opportunities laid out. See that red one? It's got a status of red because it's at risk right now. So if you're trying to move everything along, nurse along all these different opportunities, you might want to pay special attention to those reds and yellows. We think based on analysis it's happening automatically. This one is at risk. This one has negative sentiment, or it's been too long, or the people you're talking to are not the key decision makers, or your team is not fully engaged. And when you open it up and say, well, why are you telling me that? You can actually see some of those other reports that are right here where it's saying, here's exactly why I think this is true. Here's the sentiment I've seen. Here's how long it's been since the last communication. Here's how long you spend on each phone call with them. That's not as long as you spend on other ones you've been winning. So you might need to look at that a little more closely. And this is who knows whom analysis. So this actually looks at everything going on inside of Exchange, not just inside of Dynamics. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of Trisha Potter there, if you look at that little build there, I can actually see who knows Trisha best in my organization, not just based on stuff that's in Dynamics, but everything that's in my Microsoft offering from Microsoft. So Microsoft 365. So has Trisha been engaging with someone else internally via a lot of email? Is she in someone's contact list? I believe this is even going out to LinkedIn. If not now, I think it's on the roadmap to do that. So you can quickly say, if I need to get in touch with Trisha, I can go look at this and say, who is the best person that I have a connection with in my organization to help me create a better connection to Trisha? And that brings together data from a lot of different places to make that happen. A lot of other stuff here, right? So here's some KPI summary types of information. KPIs are also a type of descriptive information. Topical analysis, AI looking at different case types, spotlighting emerging issues such as specific terms that are coming up again and again, customer satisfaction information. All of these reports are actually coming out of the Customer Service Insights Dynamics 365 module. Okay, so that was discovering insights, and I focused on descriptive because predictive and prescriptive are really part of your process of translating those insights into some form of action. So let's talk about those briefly. So again, a slight departure here to talk about building the watch. When you want to do prescriptive or predictive analytics, it's been around for a very long time. So although a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, this stuff is brand new, it's been around for a while. The difference is it is now affordable to more people or to more organizations, and more organizations have enough data to make it work. But when you want to bring all that data together, analytical tools, they don't like relational data. Here's what I mean by relational data, right? You have a customer in the orange box there. That customer has multiple transactions with you, right? They've bought a lot of different things from you over time, hopefully. And each of those transactions have a lot of line items in them. I buy something, but when I buy a thing, I don't buy a thing. When I go to Amazon and I have a transaction, I might have 5 or 10 or 15 things in that transaction, just like at the grocery store. And this model, this is a simplified view. Think about interactions. Exact same kind of thing happens over there. So AI doesn't like that. It doesn't really know how to look at a relational hierarchy like this. What it likes is a flat file. It says, I want one record per customer with all the information about that customer in one row. So this is a little over your head. Think about an Excel spreadsheet where I say, here's Jeff Abels, my customer, and I have 5,000 cells of information about Jeff Abels with all the stuff I know about him. One row down, here is Lori Gramer, the next customer. Here's the 5,000 things I know about Lori. Whereas traditional databases say that's stored in a complex network of relationships to make it easy for a user to look at, not necessarily a computer to look at. This is part of what analysts, predictive modelers, data scientists spend about 80% of their time doing, taking it out of this user-friendly format and putting it into an analytics-friendly format, a flat file. And this, again, is where DataFlex, the common data service, the common data model, is going to play an absolutely transformative, game-changing role. So instead of saying, wow, I got to hire a really smart person who can do data processing in my shop to get the data ready just to have another really smart person do the analytics. No, all that data processing can happen automatically, and a lot of the analytics can happen automatically, but you've got to be built on top of a common data service, a common data model to make that happen. And again, if you're not heading in that direction, it's not just throwing a switch. It's not sort of a, hey, we're going to make that switch, next year in February. It takes a long time to get your data structured this way and begin to move forward. If you don't have a plan to do that yet, you need a plan to do that, because I guarantee you in the next few years, you're going to be scrambling to catch up if you don't have your data prepared and in the right format. So big picture of the rest of preparing data for analysis is this. You want a sample of people who have displayed the behavior you want, successes, and you want a sample of people who have displayed a behavior you don't want, the failures, right? Not failures as people, but just failures in terms of the behavior you want. Simple example, here's a list of leads. Here are the leads that have been qualified and become opportunities. Here's a list of leads that were disqualified and never became opportunities. And AI, analytics, predictive modeling can look at that and say, now of those other leads that are open, I can predict which ones of them are going to be qualified and which ones are going to be disqualified. And I can give them a score from 0 to 100. So if you only have time to work the top 20 leads in your bucket today, I can tell you which 20 leads you should be working, right? Now that's a simple example that can be applied to all sorts of different things. So Dynamics 365 Sales Insights actually has this says free, and this is not true. This is the paid version. I need to update the slide. It has that predictive modeling built into it. So you can literally point to your leads and say, I want you to build a predictive model for me. You can point to your opportunities and say, I want you to build a predictive model for me. Score these guys for me, and it can do that for you. That's prescriptive. So now you can, instead of saying, describe my opportunities and I'll decide which ones to follow up on, you can say, prescribe for me. Tell me which ones, predict which ones are likely to close, and prescribe for me the best ones for me to spend my time following up on, right? Here's some other outputs from that process. So you can, if I'm looking at a specific lead, it's even saying this one has a grade of A. It says it's 94% likely to close. And here are the reasons in box number 2 that I have identified in CRM as to why they're likely to do that. So I can form a conversation around those things. So it's not just a list sorted, it actually gives me a little bit of conversational cues to look at as well. Now this is actually another tool called Versium. And just to quickly mention it, because Versium actually looks at external data. Remember how I said demographic is the least predictive data about what someone might do in the future? But the reality is, if they're not a customer yet, that's the only data that you have on them, right? You're not going to know their transactions. You're probably not going to know many interactions to start with, but you are going to know what their demographics are. With Versium, I can load up my CRM database or a part of it and say, here are people that look like the kind of people I want to talk to. Those might be consumers, those might be businesses. It supports both. And Versium says, okay, look, I'm going to sell you a list. But when you select your list from me, I'm going to give you the list of people that are most likely to actually become the customers you want. And you can see from red bars to green bars. So if I'm only going to go to the top 10% of the list, I'm going to go to that very top green bar. I'm going to buy that list and go after that list of individuals. So this takes the predictive thing I showed you for existing customers or leads that might already be in Dynamics, and instead applies it to an external list if you're going to acquire that. And I know I'm right up against my time here, so I'll move through these last few pretty quickly. If you want to get the implementation of all of this, remember, you're going to use DataFlex to bring all of this together. You're going to probably use data warehousing, which is a back end that puts stuff in something like Power BI. You're going to be able to define segments, and then you're going to integrate all of that with CRM to have very detailed customer profiles and predict the future. All of that is built into the Dynamics 365 customer insights, which is more marketing focused. And there's a couple of screenshots from that. This is actually even meant for point of sale retail. So I can see if someone comes into the store, I might be able to look them up and be able to interact with them in a more meaningful way. Fuzzy matching lets me do things like say, hey, I have Jeff Abels at one address and I have Jeffrey Abels at what looks like the same address. Are these the same people or not? It helps you to fuzzy match to bring those relationships together. Okay. Going back to our, I don't know if you remember Bert Hare from our conversation analytics in the first segment of this. Here is a much more detailed prescriptive analytics piece of information for Bert. So you saw that conversation intelligence from the transcribed calls come in, but look at the detailed, rich dashboard Bert and Bert's manager can now have to say, here's what you're doing well, here's what you're not doing so well. You need to slow down your tempo a little bit. It looks like some negativity creeps into your language. That doesn't work well for others. Maybe you want to change that. All those things can come together to help naturally, but using artificial intelligence complemented with human intelligence, help us improve as humans and how we work with each other day to day. I'm not going to talk much about bots today because we don't have much time, but what I will tell you is if you want to go to those two links, www.qnamaker.ai, that is a Microsoft site. I guarantee you, no matter what your experience level is, you can type in some questions and answers and you can create a bot in just a couple of minutes. So bots kind of bring a lot of these different things together to have a conversation with somebody on an automated basis. And there's some amazing bot stuff going on in Dynamics in the Power Platform right now that you can integrate into your websites or integrate into CRM and Teams for your day-to-day users to use. Here's a little bit of a flow for one of the AI-driven bots you can create. Okay, our last quick segment before we pause for some questions, and that's this idea of faster learning cycles. So this is kind of the typical learning cycle. Way back in the day, I told you in the 90s, I was running a group that did some of this kind of work. And we were working in the direct mail and telephone marketing industry only. So particularly in direct mail, we have what we called 2 or 3 learning cycles per year because you had to go do all your research, get your list, send your mail, wait for it to come back, wait for source systems to get updated, wait for that data to update our back-end data warehouse, rerun the analytics to say, how do we get smarter? How do we do this better and better? In today's world, with the common data model and with analytics within reach of everybody else, companies are having many more learning cycles per year, some of them happening in real time. This is the thing, it's hard for me to express, it's hard for me to explain to you the value of this. What I can tell you is if you are so agile that you're having 12 or 24 or 50 learning cycles per year, and your competition is having 4 or 8 or 10 learning cycles per year, you are going to fast outpace them. Or if the reverse is true, you're going to be outpaced very quickly. That's what this is all about. It's about agility. It's about being able to learn faster, continuously change with much more agility than you've ever done before. And if you don't have the back-end tools to do it, you're going to be left behind. So I've got a lot of interest and passion in these things. So we've covered these 5 topics today. If I put them slightly differently, I would say really it's about listening and gathering data. It's about understanding and analyzing that data. It's about connecting, making better decisions to connect with people and have better relationships. Then it's about knowing the results to have more continuous learning cycles year over year. If you know me, you know the acronym, Powered by Luck. It's about being powered by luck as an organization, not purely for the sake of the financials, but for the sake of the relationships, for the sake of having more meaningful business and interpersonal relationships than we've ever had before. And if you embrace that and embrace the cultural paradigm, it's not just about what we do, it's about how we do it, and it's about why we do it. Luck is what you do, good luck is why you do it. So remember, the soft stuff in all of this is the hard stuff. You look at all this and you think, oh, wow, I really want this. It looks like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. The culture change, getting your people to embrace a new way of thinking and doing things, that's the much bigger hill to climb. It's climbable, but it's not easy to do. But I would say Microsoft's put a bunch of great tools out there for you to use. We engage with people to do this all the time. If you want to learn more, if you want to get started with this, if you want to go further, give me a call, look me up. I'm glad to help you. My contact information is there. Lori, I'm talking fast because I know I'm a little bit past time here, but I've got a few minutes to stick around for questions if there are any.
All right, fabulous, Jeff. You were talking too fast, but you're just fine. You got it all in. All right, questions. If anybody has any at this point, please submit them. Otherwise, you can always reach out to Jeff. I know Jeff is more than willing to help the community whenever needed. So please reach out. He's got his contact information listed on the screen. If you have any questions, let him know. I'm going to do a quick scroll to see if any hands are raised. If you'd like to unmute your line, we can certainly do that. But I don't see any hands raised at this time. So Jeff, I think we'll go ahead and wrap.
All right. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Till next time.
All right. So appreciate you being here, Jeff, and all you have to share to our attendees. As we close down, you'll receive a quick survey. Appreciate you giving that feedback. It's a couple quick questions with a comment section. Love to hear from you. Love to know what the user group community can be doing different, better, the same, whatever it may be. Love to hear from you all. So have a great day. We'll get the link of the recording sent to your inboxes within a couple hours. So look for that to come. We look forward to seeing you back on an upcoming webinar. So take care all. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Lori. Bye-bye, everyone.